be jealous of my bookshelf.
Okay, here we go, dude. We're about to start. Here we go. Aloha and welcome to the Bear Woznick adventure. This is the place where you can go to find the grittiest and the manliest men in the world. And that's why we have our returning guest today with us. Is going to be our cool guest and great friend, Jason Jones. Aloha, Jason.
Aloha, Bear.
Okay, so this is a new experiment. For those of you who are listening to us on the radio, we're actually pre-recorded this using Facebook Live and using YouTube. So in the future, if you go to our website, bearwoznick.com, we'll clue you in when we're going to be doing the YouTube Live transmissions. You can get to it through Facebook or through our website. So, Jason, you were the very first interview we did for this radio show. Was it in 2012, I think, right? Way back in the olden days. Yeah.
What a privilege.
I know it is for you.
To have as your first guest. And look at what that did for you. It shot you to like 500 stations.
Yeah, I know. And you know what's really funny about my office? People are going to know this now, is that my chair likes to sink randomly, have me sink down. But remember, I don't know if you remember, but the first time we were going to try this new technology and try to get the chance to interview you and have it go out live streaming at the same time, and we just failed miserably. So this is our second shot at it. So it's not so much that we think you're a great guest, but we know you're really patient with us. and so while we're going through this process,
this is the face that you want to be the first time your radio show has viewers.
Yeah. So, and we're out on BWA313 radio Saturday nights at 6 p.m., but we're also, people can go to bearwoznick.com and they can click on the link and watch the video version of it too, or they can just get the audio version. But I noticed when we got on Skype, there's something wrong with your arms. What happened to them?
I don't know. I got bit by a mosquito. But Bear, you're in my office right now, and so my office is in my garage, and I don't have air conditioning, but I have a fan, and my fan would be too loud for your show. So
you're going to perspire.
Sweating for you in the hot West Oahu heat.
You're suffering for Jesus in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be home, I guess, in less than a week.
A bookshelf, Bear? Look at that.
They're cool. I know, aren't they cool? I ask people this a lot on the show too. What's other than the book that you just wrote, your second book? What are your books up there that we're seeing? They're so cool.
Well, so I've got like this whole shelf is like Eric Voegelin, complete works of Eric Voegelin, Leo Strauss. Then I have theology, philosophy. There's one book. Where did it go?
It's probably called Deep in the Wave: A Surfing Guide to the Soul by Bear Woznick.
Yeah, I know, but where are they? Where is it? This is like the shelf with my friends' books.
You got to turn this way and talk into the microphone, you rookie.
Sorry, guys.
But I mean, you're using it. You're using it as a doorstop.
You're supposed to be on the shelf.
You're using my book as a doorstop.
No, I probably gave them all away. I give them away all the time.
Yeah, well, thanks. Well, anyway, we got Jason Jones on our show, and I asked Jason about 3 months ago what books he would recommend that would really let me go deep in Catholic social teaching. And then like 100 days later, he says, I got a new book called on Catholic social teaching. Now we're seeing your backside, Jason, on Facebook Live.
I'm just getting books for you, Bear.
Hey, but tell me,
I get to recommend books.
Your first book was The Race to Save Our Century by Jason Jones. And what's your new book?
The World is on Fire by Jason Jones.
Okay.
Too. Now, and also with my co-writer, John Zmirak.
Thank God for John, huh?
No, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And but because I was really serious. I'm reading through some of the encyclical letters and others by John Paul II. A lot of social justice teaching there. What is the essence of your new book on social justice? I want to go through the basic teaching of the Catholic Church on the different elements of social justice with you. And by the way, Jason Jones speaks all over the country, all over the world. He was recently in Mosul, and he's cracking me up right now, you guys, because he's standing up on his chair trying to find a book. And we get to see his backside on Facebook Live. But anyway, so you recently were over in Iraq. Well, there's the book, Deep in the Wave: A Surfing Guide to the Soul by Bear Woznick. And Deep Adventure, The Way of Heroic Virtue by Bear Woznick. So I know it helps keep the doors open good, I know. So, but anyway, I mean, he travels everywhere. He's a pro-life advocate. He speaks about 180 days a year, and also involved in stopping sex trafficking. We were together in San Antonio when we were riding motorcycles, long ride home, and we went down to the brothels and prayed the rosary. And And so let's start right there. Tell them about that experience. Speaking of social justice, being down there by the brothels.
Yeah, it was a sorrowful experience because it was in I think it's called Telegraph Road, and the brothels were at the corner of Telegraph Road and Roe. RO,
ROE. Yeah.
yeah, like Roe v. Wade, which was startling, which reminded me of the fact that during the 19th century, abortion clinics and brothels were one institution. The men went there at night and their wives went there during the day for their abortions because the brothel owners were the experts at performing abortions because they had to do these abortions on the women that they exploited that worked for them at night. So it was strange to see how things just don't change. But what was really beautiful, Bear, the work that you and I do, and this is no disrespect to you or me, but it's thin. Our work is very thin. And what I mean by that is it's broad. Because of media, especially you with your reality show and radio, you are reaching countless hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, but it may be a thin level. When we were there at Telegraph Road, there was this just beautiful apostolate of a handful of women and men who go very deep day after day, week after week on that one square block. That's their one square block. And they own that block, and they're there to share the gospel of Jesus Christ and to witness to the young women and to the men who go to those brothels. And I admire, just being there, I feel so inadequate. And I just admire them so much for their fortitude and their discipline to just be there week after week, so sorrowful, right? A lot of what we do is joyful but what they do, it's just so sorrowful and in such a dark place. But there they are with the light of Jesus Christ week after week.
Right.
It was a great experience to be there with them.
And, we as we were praying the rosary in front of the fourth or fifth brothel, the pimp showed up, and then his enforcer showed up to kind of try to back up over us a bit. And you were there, I was there, a couple other guys were there. We're all wearing these biker vests. And I think it calmed down, maybe, kind of irked them, but they were a little bit of intimidated as we prayed. And then there was that one moment, Jason, that I won't forget. And that was when that woman stuck her head out the window and it was like she smiled and like gave us a thumbs up. And then she was pulled back inside. So
Yeah.
Talk for us a moment about that. Was the area, it's one of the number one sex trafficking areas in the world, right there in downtown Houston, I think you said.
Yeah, no, that's what we were told, and I believe it. It's one of the reasons there's such a debate in this country about border security. Should we secure the border? Should we build a wall? I've been on both sides of that border working against the sex industry, sex traffickers. Mexicali, the town, is 50% Chinese. At least that's what I was told by the mayor, and there's a large Chinese population. And he told me it's a hub of trafficking women from Asia into the United States illegally across our southern border. And so I think securing our southern border is so important because we see that in Texas and those border towns, they are a hotbed of sexual exploitation. And even more tragic than that, believe it or not, is American men, go across the border and they'll bring minors, children, for pedophile sex rings. They'll go right across the border into Mexico, American men. And it's sorrowful. But then that brings me back to, our topic of Catholic social teaching. And I think it's unfortunate, and maybe it's because of the talking head culture that we have, that Catholic social teaching is often presented by eggheads as if it's something like you need to be some sort of intellectual or some sort of egghead to grasp. Where we saw in those beautiful tiny little Mexican ladies that were there praying the rosary, standing up to the thugs of that industry week after week, they thoroughly get Catholic social teaching. It's something that you don't need a PhD from the Catholic University of America to understand. It's very simple. It's living living like a Christian in the world. Seeing in the other, seeing in our neighbor their incomparable dignity, beauty, and worth. And if you've got that, you've got most of it. I mean,
Well,
you're almost all the way home.
does your book kind of lay it out so that someone like I can understand it, like me can understand it?
I think I don't know if someone like you can understand it, but I think most people will be able to grasp it for
Well,
sure.
what's the title of the book again before we take our break?
It's called The World Is on Fire.
The World Is on
And
Fire.
my first book was a bit eggheady, to be honest, and we wrote it that way for a reason, because we were trying to address the sort of misappropriation of Catholic social teaching and victimist ideologies, and so we had to address them at their level. But The World Is on Fire is just applying the principles of Catholic social teaching to the issues of today. Everything from the United States drone program to immigration, to abortion, to end of life issues, to the Second Amendment. If it's in the news, it's in the book.
So we can find you at Movie to Movement. We're talking to Jason Jones. This is Bear Woznick. We'll be right back with more of the Bear Woznick adventure. Hey, Jason. Time to wake up. Jason Jones sitting underneath this coconut tree in Waikiki. I'll be home there soon, Jason. Coming there in a week to spend a few weeks back at my home in Waikiki. Looking forward to seeing you. But our guest today is Jason Jones, and he's one of the best friends I have in the world. I admire him so much. We kind of almost, I think like you say, we're kind of like a left hook or a jab hook uppercut, punch hook uppercut. You and I are kind of in the same. We kind of battle along the same in this sort of a similar way. I think that you do a great job of reaching out beyond the Vatican wall, so to speak. You're able to reach people for Christ that would normally not even pay attention to us. Jason Jones represented the United States in I forget it was in Japan. The one of the original fights. Can you give me the name again? I'm sorry, Jason.
Yeah, it's the World Tournament. It's every 4 years in Japan they have a full contact martial arts tournament where people come from all over the world. And in 1995, when I was a young man, I had the privilege of representing our country. I didn't represent our country well though, Bear. I have to.
Well, you were your knee. I saw the fight. Your knee was you feel real vulnerable. You didn't look vulnerable. You did a flying jump kick, but your knee was really in a bad way. And I know both times I was training, for my first and second degree ninja belt, my knee one time and my calf was ripped the other time, and it leaves you feeling a little bit vulnerable. But the reality is, if you're going to be in a fight, you're probably going to be injured. So you should learn how to fight injured, right? I mean, there you go.
No, I'm injured now. I'm going to be training today, and that's especially as we get older. I find we become limited, and that increases the fun. It makes it more challenging. Oh, great! Now I have a rotator cuff injury. Oh, great! Now my meniscus is hurting again. It's always something, but it's always going to be something.
Every athlete I know is always dinged in some way, and in some way, every athlete is almost always dinged. And there are those moments in my life that I go, "Hey, I don't have any injuries." It's just such a rare time, but it's kind of a lesson in life too. Our lesson is a life in adversity, and we're kind of dinged. We have a wounded soul, but our job is to work our way through that. And every athlete knows you can go to the gym. You can do your sport. You just have to find a way to work around, the injury. And I think that's true in our lives too. We need to learn that, like David said, by thee I can leap a wall, by thee I can crush a troop. We can do the impossible if we just press on, and if we're pressing on in God's will. And that's what I see in you. I see just walls just fall down because you're pressing on. You never give up. You're relentless, and you move. And God opens the way for your ministry.
Well, I mean, it doesn't. You know how it is in all apostolic work, and the folks listening, and their apostolates and their family and their parishes. I think they understand. It doesn't feel that way when you're in it, and then you look back, and then you're like, wow, how did we get that movie made? How did that movie do so well? But when you're in it, you often feel like a failure, but that's also a great privilege. I love that you use the word vulnerable, because I think that's a key tenet of Catholic social teaching, that we are called to share our strengths with the vulnerable, to live in solidarity with the vulnerable, and to the point of our own vulnerability. In fact, if I think that we're not truly living out our life as Christians if we don't feel ourselves is insecure, if we don't feel unsettled, if we don't feel vulnerable, because we're surrounded by a world of people who are sick, who are poor, who are vulnerable, who are scared. And if we're sharing their burdens, the burdens are much bigger than any of us can carry, right? You can be the wealthiest man in the world, but if you're thoughtful to the burdens of those around you, that burden's much bigger than your wealth can bear. You can be the most influential man in the world. You can be president of the United States. But the problems of the world are bigger than the shoulders of the president of the United States. So each and every one of us in our apostolates, if we're thoughtful to our privileges and opportunities, we're going to be vulnerable. And a lot of people quit the apostolic life at the moment of vulnerability, or they'll do it up into the point of vulnerability. But I think our apostolic life begins when it's uncomfortable. To quote Muhammad Ali, he was asked how many sit-ups he does, and he says, I don't know. I don't start counting them until it starts to hurt.
Praise God. Yeah, beautiful.
And that's the apostolic life, right? Like, if you're enjoying it, it hasn't started yet,
Amen.
If you start a pregnancy center in your community and things are going well and all the clients that are coming through the door are choosing life, your apostolic life hasn't begun yet. It's when your city and county passes an ordinance to try to shut your doors, when you have several girls in a row after being counseled still walk out your door and go to Planned Parenthood. That is the moment that your apostolic life begins. That is the moment where you become as vulnerable as your clients.
It's the cross.
Yeah,
I want to ask you to get specific now. I asked you a few months ago, Jason, what's a good book? Some good books I can read that really boil down Catholic social teaching. So you went out and wrote one. And what is the new title of your new book again?
Yeah, it's The World is on Fire. And my first book, The Race to Save Our Century, and both of them are available at Amazon, looks at the 5 core principles of Catholic social teaching and applies them, and looks at how if the West wouldn't have abandoned these core principles, the 20th century, the sorrowful disaster of the 20th century could have been averted.
Well, what are those core principles?
So, here's the book. And the first principle is, this is the first book, The Race to Save Our Century. And the second book, The World is on Fire, we don't go over the principles, but you can see them applied into the issues of the day. For example, maybe we can talk about immigration in another segment, but it's an issue I like to talk about.
We've got time right now. Go for it.
Okay, well, the 5 principles are, the first principle, which is the founding principle, the most important principle, I think, to grasp, is the truth of who we are. Right? If you don't know who the human person is, you're lost. And that is the Imago Dei, or the incomparable dignity and beauty of the human person. And we need to cultivate, we need to see our neighbors as who they really are. And they are truly the most beautiful creatures in the cosmos. If you can get in a rocket ship and go in every direction for millions of light years, and you're never going to bump into anything as beautiful as your neighbor who leaves the trash can out for 3 days after pickup, who annoys you to death, right? Or his kid who drives in at 2 a.m. blasting his music, or your boss who's obnoxious and has body odor. You're not going to, in your entire life, there's nothing in the cosmos more beautiful than our neighbor. And that is the founding principle to me of Catholic social teaching, who the human person is.
Imago Dei. Yeah.
Imago Dei.
Imago Dei.
Second is transcendent moral order, that there's a law above the laws of man, that we are not prisoners of our time. We are not prisoners of the zeitgeist or the spirit of the age. The spirit of the age is always tyrannical. The spirit of the age always has its inquisitions. The spirit of the age always has its pious zealots that demand absolute conformity. Today in the United States, They want to outlaw gender pronouns and are advocating this bizarre gender identity politics. In the 1930s in Germany, they would have been pandering some bizarre racist ideology. The Bolsheviks in Russia in the late, in the 1917, 1918, they would have been pandering this totalitarian socialism. But the zeitgeist is always tyrannical. All that liberates us from that is the truth of the transcendent moral order. There's a law above the opinions and laws of man. So who the human person is and what is their transcendent destiny, the fact that there's a transcendent moral order, subsidiarity, the idea that the closer an institution is to you, the more influence it should have in your life. I think we all believe that that I should have more to say about what my child eats than the Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. So subsidiarity is another important principle.
It's a principle that works out even in the diocesan level, the way the whole Catholic Church is set up. There's that outreach at the basic parish level. It's not. The Pope is the servant of the servants. It's not a top-down, church.
And we have movements in the church. We have religious orders in the church, and and that's why the church has survived for 2,000 years. If it was a top-down, like we are accused of, right? We're accused of basically, being a cult that worships the Pope and marches in lockstep to his every whim. That's the furthest thing from the truth. And by the way, that's something I want to get to about Catholic social teaching. Let me get to the principles real quick.
No, let's take a little break here. We'll get you back to that and repeat these again. I want to go over them again. The first two you mentioned are Imago Dei.
The Imago Dei, the transcendent moral order, subsidiarity, solidarity, our idea that we should share the burdens of the vulnerable, which I already talked about, and the humane economy, the idea that a just social order is grounded in private property rights, set within stewardship and responsibility into the multiple commonwealths, from our political communities to our family that we're born into.
Okay, we're talking with Jason Jones, movie2movement.com. I hear Harley's warming up. It's time to take a little break. We'll be back with our guest, Jason Jones. This is Bear Woznick with the Bear Woznick Adventure. You can find us at bearwoznick.com. We decided we just make it that because no one ever can remember the name of our ministry. But you can go there and you can find all kinds of cool stuff there, including our 10 DVD set of our Long Ride Home reality TV show, which Jason Jones insists he's the star of. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. It's Bear Woznick. This is the Bear Woznick Adventure. I was with Archbishop Wensky riding Harleys down from Miami to Key West, and we were having a cigar at Little Havana, having a scotch with him. And I go, Archbishop, what is this? We're having scotch and a cigar. Is this Christian? He goes, we're Catholics. And so, kind of like in that honor of Archbishop Wensky, we have our new whiskey tumblers, you guys, the Bear's Man Cave whiskey tumblers. It has one of our sayings on the back. So if you get a couple of these and you're sharing a drink with your friends, it gives you the chance to talk about the virtues. And we say here, abandonment to God's will begins the wild adventure. Bear Woznick, the Bear's Man Cave. We also have a beer mug. And, the whole concept of virtue is to do things in moderation. So we have the Bear's Man Cave beer mug too. But I'm really cool. I'm excited about this too, the Long Ride Home coffee cup. So, but what I'm really excited about, we have as our guest, Jason Jones. Hey, Jason, you know what I'm really excited about? We have our 7 Virtue cigars now. It's the coolest thing.
That is brilliant.
I mean, look at this.
I made whiskey tumblers for Baptist radio, and I sold 4 of them.
But we have these 7 Virtue cigars. They're the Bear's Man Cave cigars. They're beautiful, beautiful cigars. And, each style was handpicked. But what's so cool about these cigars is you can share one with a friend. And so they're the 7 virtues. So you have, for example, Coraggio, Fortitude. That's one type of cigar. When you get into the cardinal virtues tend to be lighter versions of cigars. But when you get up into the theological virtues, we use Maduro's. But when you peel off the label, people, when you share a cigar and you really enjoy it with a friend, you can save the label as a memory. But these, you have to peel off the label before you can finish smoking them properly. So when you peel off that label, there's a quote in there about that virtue. And so it's a way of kind of a discussion starter with your friends. So how's that, Jason? It's the coolest thing. The Holy Spirit, I think, just kind of gave us that inspiration.
What I love about that, Bear, is, leisure is so valuable. And in that, I see thoughtfulness towards spending time with other men, but also a thoughtfulness of the apostolate of friendship, that we should use those moments to share our faith. And so I think it's brilliant.
Well, we want to invite people who are watching us live on YouTube while we record this. We're pre-recording this for our EWTN show, which airs, 6 p.m. Saturday nights, all over the world, Eastern Time, Global Catholic Radio Network. You can enter a question on our live chat, so we can try to give a question to Jason, try to make him squirm a little bit. But Jason Jones, a man I respect deeply, love. Whenever I see him, my life gets better, and also I get challenged. But Jason, we were talking about your new book. What's the name of it again?
The World is on Fire.
The World is on Fire, which is kind of a sequel. It takes things a different sort of demographic. The first book was A Race to Save Our Century. But we're talking about, I want you to repeat again, what are the 4 basic principles of Catholic social justice, according to our catechism, according to the church, the official teachings of the church? I just read John Paul II, some of his encyclicals, and he nails that first one. Like you talked about how so many the zeitgeist of the century or of the decade, it's really thought police, and how mankind puts people into cogs and into a machine, but we're really imago Dei. We're made in the image of God, and we have to treat people as persons, individual persons. So can you give us
what I love about Catholic social teaching is, and these principles are principles that I have drawn from from the church teachings. But Catholic social teaching is not an ideology. It's not like a party platform. And there's not a position like, this is the Catholic position on immigration, or this is the Catholic position on minimum wage, or this is even the Catholic position on abortion. Right now, people are squirming like, what? The Catholic Church obviously believes that all human beings deserve full legal protection from violence. But what bills are introduced to do that? What's the best way to do that through the legislative process? Well, that's going to be left up to prudential decision, where Catholics can disagree. And by the way, they do disagree. There are Catholics who really are emotionally committed to, say, a human life amendment to the Constitution. Others think we should go through the courts. Well, these are prudential decisions. What we are united on is believing and knowing that every human person deserves full legal protection from violence, whether it's the child in the womb, right, in 2017 in the United States of America, or whether it's a young Black girl in, Kansas City and or in Louisville, Kentucky in 1945. That we all deserve full legal protection from violence. How we get there? What bills are introduced? That's prudential. Let's take immigration, for example. You'll hear people say, they'll take certain positions on immigration. By the way, very vague, never concrete. They'll take vague sentiments on immigration and try to canonize them. Well, here's what we know. We know that as Christians, we have an obligation to be thoughtful and caring to the vulnerable. We have to be loving and caring for migrants. So does that mean that a nation state doesn't have a right to secure its borders? Well, no, of course not. In fact, the Catechism is very clear. The Church is very clear that a nation state has the duty to secure its borders. It's not an option. It's duty. And so you hear this heated rhetoric on immigration. And here's the reality. We know that we have a problem with millions of people trapped in an underground economy. So in my book, The World on Fire, you'll see me make the case for a position in immigration that I believe is drawn, it is drawn from Catholic social teaching. People can come to another position with Catholic social teaching, then we got to work it out. But what I advocate for is airtight border security. We must secure the border to protect our nation state, to protect vulnerable migrants from economic exploitation, to shut down the cartels and the human and sex traffickers. We have a duty to make sure that that border is secure. We also need an e-verification system that's mandatory and easy to use, so that no employer will, that every employee will have, working in this country, will have the same architecture of legal protection as the next guy. We live in a country right now, Bear, where there are millions of people who are working in an underground economy and have no legal protections, no workplace protections. And then folks like you and I, we have this really complex, huge architecture of workplace protection. Everyone working in this country should have that. And this is a controversial position, I do believe in a path to residency and citizenship for migrants who've been working in this country. Now, some Catholics who are good Catholics disagree with me on an e-verify. They will disagree with me on a path to citizenship. It doesn't mean they're not good Catholics. For example, Steve Bannon disagrees with me on the DREAM Act. I support the DREAM Act. And he made a really good point to me. He said, Jason, if we secure the border, we have a mandatory verification system, we have this loophole for minors, what's that going to do? That's going to encourage smuggling children into this country away from their parents when they're younger. They'll send younger migrants in to feed the demand for illegal migrant labor. And so that's his point. And so he is thoughtful to the vulnerable. He's thoughtful to these children. And we as Catholics need to work it out. And that's why I wrote this book, because there's a lot of canonization of people's political parties and political positions, when what we really need to do as Catholics is to have a preferential option for the vulnerable. I've never liked this expression, preferential option for the poor, because just because you're poor, it doesn't mean you're vulnerable. And just because you're rich doesn't mean you're not vulnerable. If you're a Jew in Berlin in 1936, you're vulnerable. If you're Chinese in Indonesia in 1997, you're vulnerable. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are. But what we do need to have a preferential option for the vulnerable. And of course, oftentimes, the materially poor are extremely vulnerable, and we need to have them top of mind. And that's where Catholic social teaching leads us. It also leads us to recognizing that socialism has been condemned by the church. We see socialism now masquerading, trying to put the imprimatur of it somehow it's Catholic, which is bizarre. You see people like George Soros.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading John Paul II's encyclicals right now, and he straight out challenges that, that position. So read the writings of the church before you start blowing smoke. You were, the other thing about it is that the Catholic Church teaches that there's a lot of different over the years, the Catholic Church has survived 2,000 years of different types of systems: democratic, monarchies, polygarch. I forget the correct word. Polygarch, I think is the word. Socialism, communism, all these things we've survived. But the key thing is that the people be a people of virtue, and in that and a respect for the person. You can kind of survive in any state, but giving people the right to speak and to represent themselves, of course, is the best. We're talking with Jason Jones. Movie2movement.com is where they can find you. We get to have another full segment with Jason. But what is your newest book that we're talking about?
Well, that's my new book, The World is on Fire. It's available at Amazon.com. And again, we talk about the Second Amendment from the Catholic perspective. We address the drone program in the United States and looking at it through Catholic eyes. And another website you guys can go to that our organization has is called serviumusa.org. And this website is committed to nothing but advancing Catholic social teaching to protect the vulnerable.
Okay, we got to take a break, Jason. Just give us that again one more time, the website.
Serviumusa.
Spell it.
SERVIAM. Serviumusa.org. And if you're a Latin teacher, I know it's Servium, but people will hear it better if I say Servium.
Okay, we got to go. We'll be right back, Jason.
Thank you, sir. Bear, Rana, guys, you hear me?
Hey, it's Bear Woznick. Welcome to the Bear Woznick Adventure. I'm with my guest, my good friend, someone who I really admire, Jason Jones, the founder of Movie to Movement, the author of The Race to Save Our Century, and his newest book is I can't remember it, Jason. I have it written down. I don't have my glasses on. What's the new book's name again?
It's The World is on Fire. I'd love to tell you how I got the name.
Yeah, tell us. Cool, tell us.
All right. So, by the way, is this on live right now on FaceTime Live so I can see it?
Yeah, it's live, but it's too technical probably for you to watch it right now.
Oh, okay. So, I was watching The Daredevil about a year and a half ago with my wife, this Netflix series called The Daredevil. And the character is this Catholic blind ninja superhero.
It's a cool show. It's written by Catholics, right? It's a really cool show.
Yeah, it's super cool. And this nurse that cares for him discovers that this blind man is the Daredevil, and she says, "So you're not blind?" And he's like, "No, I'm blind." He's like, "Well, how can you do all this if you can't see?" He's like, "Well, I can see. Just because I'm blind doesn't mean I can't see." And she goes, "Well, what do you see?" And then all of a sudden, you see this montage of sorrow and violence all around the world, starting in his neighborhood. And it just spreads around the world. And he says, "I see that the world is on fire."
There you go.
I literally jumped up in bed and I said to my wife, I want a candidate for president who sees the world through the Daredevil's eyes, that knows the world is on fire. And then a week later, Ted Cruz quoted that film and that TV show, and it caused trouble because it made a little girl cry in the audience because she was scared because she thought the world was on fire. But the world is on fire, Bear. There are children in our parishes that are being sexually abused. There are families that are being torn apart by drugs and adultery and pornography. There are relatives in our families who are addled and being crushed by debt and all around us. Not to look at what's happening in Texas or happening in Kurdistan. And here we are, Catholics in the United States, with access to this incredible technology, which allows us to reach millions of people at very little cost or effort comparatively to what it would have done in the past. Like right now, Bear, we're talking to more people than St. Paul would have talked to in his entire lifetime right now in my home office, thanks to you and EWTN and all of this technology. Here we are, the most privileged Christians, the most privileged Catholics who have ever walked the face of the earth, born into the Anglo-American political community that has had 1,000 years of incredible peace and prosperity, and born into the United States of America with our Constitution grounded in the Declaration principle. We are so blessed. We are so privileged. We are so prosperous. The problem is it's made us decadent. It's made us lazy. It's made us apathetic. And well, that's what being affluent does. We don't even like to see ourselves as affluent. You know, we obsess on all these problems like gender bathrooms and gender identity and global warming and melting ice caps and all of this nonsense, because that's a lot easier to think about than the reality of, like in our home state of Hawaii, 1 out of 4 girls is sexually abused by the time she's 14, by the time she's 18. The reality of abortion clinics in every neighborhood. The sex industry, the pornography industry is bigger than Hollywood now. So it's easier to think about these small things, these silly things, these made-up things, than the reality that Chaldeans and Assyrians and Yazidis are facing an existential crisis, that they were almost wiped off the face of the earth by ISIS. The world didn't even pay attention. Again, last week, the government of Iraq and the government of Iran invaded Kurdistan, and Christians again had to flee from their cities they just went back to in Kurdistan and flee back towards their camps. Not a word in the press. That's what Catholic social teaching is. It's looking at your neighbor when they suffer.
Solidarity.
Solidarity, not looking away, not looking for cheap and easy solutions or what is this virtue signaling? We don't need to virtue signal.
What's that? Tell me what you mean by a virtue signal.
Virtue signaling is when you kneel during the national anthem rather than start a nonprofit in your neighborhood you came from and invest your own money to hire a bunch of staff and do all the tough, hard things that happen when you work with other human beings.
You know, I hear it, Jason. I hear it so much. People will tell me, you know, I really agree with you, but you know, our ministry, your ministry, our different ministries, we need funding. You know, and I'm a CPA. I look at people's tax returns. I'm going to tell you right now, Jason, during tax season, it's almost it's dramatic, the difference between what Protestants give and what Catholics give. And I always challenge the people, you know, you go to the collection plate on Sundays, don't throw in your tip money there. It should hurt a little bit when you give, you know. It's like you said from the beginning. If it doesn't hurt, it doesn't. You really haven't started your apostolate until it hurts. So I'm sorry to jump in there, but yeah, I mean, the Catholic, there's so many incredible Catholic ministries that are so underfunded. And if people would just wait, just doing that, just finding a Catholic charity that you love and support, or any charity, you know, that's doing the work. Being pro-life doesn't mean you have an opinion about it. It means you go out and work, right? Or let your money work.
Do with your sentiments. I don't care about sentiments.
Right.
The young girl in your community that just found out she's pregnant by her stepfather, who's scared to death, crying in her room alone, doesn't know where to turn, is contemplating suicide, is contemplating running away, is contemplating abortion. She doesn't need your sentiments. She needs your shoulder. She needs you to share her burdens. And we have, you know, an epidemic in this country with this virtue signaling. But here's the great news. This is the age of the laity, and this is the Catholic moment. First Things Magazine had an article a couple of years ago that said it's the end of the Catholic moment. We missed it. No way. This is the Catholic moment.
Agreed.
This is the time, and this is the age of the laity. The church has made it clear that it is our obligation as the laity to Christianize the temporal order. You're doing it, Bear, right now. I mean, when you first told me you had an idea and it was just you and your boys in your apartment, you know, figuring it out. I'm right now, Bear, I'm in my home office in Hawaii. This week I've had articles come out in newspapers in the Middle East, in Europe. I'm in German, English, Arabic, and Kurdish this week alone. You know, articles will be read by hundreds of thousands of people. There's no excuse.
Well, let me put it like this. There was a time, Jason, when the laity worked from sun up to sundown to eat, to find a way to support themselves. Most Americans, I don't know how to say this, they have so much free time, and they spend it yelling at Fox News or CNN or watching soap operas where you could be making. There's nothing more exciting to me than the fact that maybe I could see someone someday in heaven that I had an influence on that helped get them there. You know, whether it's through a work of mercy or through evangelizing, but we've got so much time on our hands. And people look at me and they go, people keep thinking I'm retired. And I go, no, I still have my business, and I have a video, I have the reality TV show, the radio show, the books, the speaking. I've never been more busy but more fulfilled in my life. But every person is called. I'm reading John Paul II now, and it's just so convicting. Every Catholic is called to be an evangelist. And during our reality show, we have every guy stand up in front of the camera and say, "Hi, I am Jason Jones, and I am a Catholic evangelist." We're all evangelists. Hey, dude, we're
some of us are really good. Some of us are really good. Some of us are gifted in that.
But you get better at it with
words. Some of us do it through actions.
Wait, you know what though? I'm going to say something about this word. Actions are really important. St. Francis said we're gonna go and preach the gospel, and we use words when necessary. And you know what? He has a good point, but I cringe at that statement. I heard it again at Mass.
Yeah.
Dude, we only speak when necessary. It is necessary now to speak. It's time to take the ridgeline and be seen for our faith. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to wrap this thing up, Jason.
Well,
Jason Jones.
Listening, I know the folks listening here are the officer corps of the laity, that they're involved in their parish.
Amen.
They're doing the hard work, the deep work in their local Catholic schools, in their families, in their neighborhoods, in their parishes. That's the important work. That's the challenging work. That's the work that takes real fortitude and hope and all the virtues. But we do need to just love it. Catholic social teaching is simply seeing your neighbor for who they are, creatures of incomparable dignity and worth, made in the image and likeness of God. That we need to acknowledge that all of us who are listening to this, we've been privileged in so many ways. We are the faces of privilege, especially by being Catholic.
We got to go, Jason. We got to go, dude.
Bam.
We always have leftovers, don't we? Jason Jones, Movie to Movement. The new book is The World is on Fire. The book before that is Race to Save Our Century. This is Bear Woznick. Find us at bearwoznick.com. That's what we use as our website now, so people kind of try to remember us. Hey, go to our website, and you men join Bear's Man Cave, and that will give you special access to a private Facebook group. You've got to go there to become a member of the Man Cave, and then we do video chats, and we got, oh man, we share everything from John Paul II to John Wayne, and smoke a cigar and have a shot of whiskey every few weeks over the video chat. Jason, I love you. Thanks for being my returning guest, my very first guest on my show. We'll have you back again soon.